Hey everyone, I'm finally getting around to doing this. I've been wanting to do it for a while, but now I'm finally getting the gumption to do it. So I'm gonna actually tell my story from when I got hit with kidney failure to the craziness that happened in between on doing dialysis, getting on the transplant list, getting kicked off the transplant list, getting back on the transplant list, all the way up until getting my transplant. I just got my bracelet today that says I'm a transplant patient. So I'm official. All this started November 7th, 2017. That day, I was like any normal day. Woke up, decided to try walking my dogs, um, and I realized I barely made it like 10 steps away from my house when I was out of breath. I felt like I was just had no air, no lungs. Um, I thought originally it was because it was about 20 degrees that day because it was one of those really cold Wisconsin days. So, you know, and at that point I still wasn't used to the winters or fall here because we had just moved here the year before from Texas. So, managed to get the dogs walked, get inside. Candy, my wife's telling me, hey, you need to go to the doctor, go get checked out. And me being stubborn, I'm like, no, I'll go to work. There's a clinic there. I'll just get checked out there. So get to work, go to the clinic, and they say, well, there's not much we can do because all we do is handle like colds and flu and stuff here. So I was like, fine, I'll just go to work, and then after work, I'll go to the ER if I'm still feeling like crap. So I'm at work and my coworker is coming up to me and she's like, "Hey, you look green. Your eyes look yellow." I'm like, "What? What are you talking about?" And then another coworker comes by. She's like, "Yeah, you look like bad." So they end up taking me to the hospital against my wishes, but they threatened to call my wife, and they did anyway. Let her know, "Hey, they're taking me to the hospital." So get to the hospital. And originally they thought like, oh, you got some fluid in your lungs, you possibly have a blood clot somewhere. Um, we'll get that checked out. And so about 30 minutes later, the same doctor comes in and basically is like, hey, it's not a blood clot. You're actually in end stage kidney failure. And it's like, what? They're like, yeah, you need to go on dialysis like now. So they admit me. I had to, call my job and call Candy, let her know what's going on. And so they rushed me to the ICU floor and get me prepared to do dialysis treatment. So anybody who's done dialysis knows that's kind of a, you know, convoluted way. They stick the catheter thing right here. I still got the scars, the three little dots where they put the chest catheter in. And that night, so it was about, all this was around 11 o'clock in the morning when they diagnosed all this. So by 8 o'clock at night, I was doing my first dialysis treatment, which I actually felt better afterwards, but that was just the beginning. So, long story short, after that, a few days later, I started realizing I can't walk. I wasn't able to stand on my own because I had lost the ability to walk. Um, so that kind of was a scary thought. And then my nephrologist had decided, they're like, hey, we're going to put you on peritoneal dialysis. And that's when they put a little catheter type of thing in your stomach, usually right there. Um, and you do dialysis at home because I was determined to still work. I wasn't going to try to let this disease beat me. So we figured um, peritoneal would be the best thing to do. So we, they go ahead and prep me for the surgery. At this point, Candy's been by and with the kids, and letting them know what's going on, and they're going through their own ordeal with the whole situation, and so this is where it starts taking a turn because I'm kind of at this point I still don't know what's really going on, and I'm in prayer, and I hear quite audibly. This is where the beginning of some of these little things that definitely shows that the Lord had His hand in everything. I hear in a very audible tone that His grace is sufficient, and it's only until now that I finally figured out what that is, and we'll get to that down the road in the story. So I get the surgery, and at this time, my parents have come up from Texas to see how I'm doing, and so that first night I couldn't sleep because from that night after the surgery for 7 days, I was throwing up stomach acid. I had hiccups. I couldn't hold anything down, so they had to put a feeding tube up my nose um, for me to actually be able to eat. And I kept insisting, I kept telling them there's something wrong with the surgery area because it hurts too much. I can feel it in there, but none of the doctors, because of course the doctors are never wrong, wanted to listen to it. And it wasn't until um, one of the surgeons came in, and I'm telling him like I feel like it's something wrong with it. It's not. There's something wrong with it. And he goes, well, let's just do a stomach X-ray just to see what's going on. Long story short, it was herniated. And when he comes in and says, hey, it's herniated, I won't lie. I looked him straight in the face and I said, well, no, dumb, I let him have it. I cussed him out, and I'm not proud of it, but I we kept telling him for 7 days I've been going through this crap, and y'all been ignoring me, thinking I'm stupid. And basically I told him off, and it was not polite. And I don't apologize for the things I said. I apologize for the way I said it. But these doctors need to realize that their patients also know what's going on with their own bodies. So if you're a doctor watching this, listen to your patients, jerks. Um, so had to get another surgery to get that done, get that repaired, and once they got it repaired, I was actually able to finally eat again. So mind you, this has been 7 days after I was not able to eat anything, throwing up stomach acid, not able to sleep, and now I've lost the ability to walk, so I can't even walk anywhere. I can't go to the restroom, so they had to put a catheter in. And anybody who's had to deal with that knows how great that feels. um, so I got to know the nurses very well because I was in the hospital for about a month um, through all this, and so if you're a nurse, I'll just let you know right now. If you work as a nurse, you are God's angels on earth. Because if honestly, if it wasn't for the nurses I had in general, I mean, but mainly for the beginning nurses, the beginning of all this, um, I wouldn't be around because those nurses really, really were great in keeping me motivated to keep fighting. And my nurses at the dialysis clinic, if you're watching, I won't name drop you. Y'all know who you are. I owe you so much. I love you more than you will ever know for every great thing you've done. And we'll get to your story because we'll get to y'all down the road here. Again, I don't know if I said this, but I'll probably break this up in a few parts because it's a pretty long story. So after they released me from the hospital, I have to go do, you know, still have to go do dialysis until the catheter is ready because that takes about a month for it to heal and be ready to go. So that's when I started doing. I was still doing hemo at the time, and I met some of them, my nurses that to this day are a very important part of my life. And again, I thank you. You know who you are. Um, and so going through the peritoneal um, dialysis, it's if you've done it before, if you've done peritoneal, you know it can be not the greatest experience. If you've never heard of peritoneal dialysis, just in a nutshell, they, like I said, catheter in your stomach when, and you have a machine that's next to your bed or wherever you decide to put it, but it's in your house. And they fill your stomach up with sugar water. Basically, it's just distilled water with sugar in it, and they put it in your stomach about 4 to 5 times a day, depending on how often your prescription is. And they fill it up so you walk around for like you're feeling like you're bloated. It stays in your system for a few hours, and the idea is much like putting sugar on strawberries to get the fluid out of it. That's what it does to your system. It also spikes your blood sugar up, so if you're diabetic, it's gonna do more damage to you than good, which was something that happened to me. Um, so from December of 2017 to about January of 2019, because it was a whole year, I was in a hospital every month. Every single month, I was in and out of that hospital. Blood sugar was spiked up. Phosphorus wasn't doing. The drainage wasn't doing right. I was constantly sick, constant flus. Just the peritoneal was just not working because my blood work was just coming back horrible. Toxins were spiking up. Creatinine was like at 16, 17. Um, and I just was sick all the time. On top, I was still working too. I was actually working full time um, during computer desk hardware support on site. So I felt like crap for that whole year, and I just kept pushing through it, pushing through it. Um, so it wasn't until that hospital stay in January that the doctors were like, you're here too much. It's causing so many problems. We're just going to move you to hemo. And so, again, chest catheter gets put back in because it had been taken out by this point. So, more scars. Um, and so, at this point, I do, they moved me to the schedule I was on since then, 3 days a week at 4 in the morning, like 4:30 in the morning, um, for 3 hours and 15 minutes. No, 3.5 hours. Sorry. So 3.5 hours sitting in a chair, having your blood sucked out of you, cleaned and put back in. Um, excuse me, hiccups. And that started working. I started feeling way better. To be honest, it worked. It was the treatment was working. Numbers were looking great. Um, I felt better. And then the hospital's visits were being reduced. From that year, I think I only went to the hospital 2 times, but they also had put a fistula in my left arm, and that brought its own problems. Anybody who's had a fistula knows that if they use the actual vein, it can be crappy and they can implode or they can crap out on you pretty easily. So that's what mine kept clogging. Mine kept repeatedly clogging. So like every month I was getting it declogged. And if you've ever had a declogged session, it sucks. Um, Unless they use the good painkillers, which luckily for me they they would, but except for this one time where the surgeon, and I won't say his name, but he was an adamant a hole. And to this day, I will call him an a hole, and I'll call him an a hole to his face. He didn't want to use it because he felt like, oh, it's not gonna be so bad. But it literally felt like somebody was breaking my arm, and until I threatened to actually get out of the bed and physically crap hurt him, is when they gave me the actual painkiller. So again, doctors, you're jerks unless you listen to your patient first. But for the most part, all of y'all are jerks. Um, so yeah, so all that is you know, and so right around 2019 is when finally um doors open to actually be put on the transplant list. Because, well, actually, let me backtrack a little bit because there were some other events that happened right after getting out of hospital in December of 2016. So in January of 2017, we got a bill, the hospital bill, for $175,000. Um, yeah, $175,000 for this hospital stay, and we were panicking. And to be honest, it was a scary thing. And then it almost seemed as, we started praying about it. Me and my wife are definitely Bible fearing believers. So we were praying, and just this peace came over us. We couldn't understand it. So again, anybody who knows the scriptures know the peace that surpasses all understanding. We experienced it. Couldn't explain what it was, and then all of a sudden, I get a phone call out of nowhere, and it's my um what's that called? Social worker for dialysis. She's letting me know that the Medicare got approved, and I'm like, what Medicare? I'm not 65. She's like, oh no, any kidney failure patient automatically gets put on Medicare. And I was like, they didn't tell me this in the hospital. They really didn't tell us at all. Um, I was like, Medicare, and they're like, yeah, they're handling your expenses. And then on top of that, we had filed. She filled out the paperwork for the American Kidney Foundation, who paid all my premiums for the Medicare. That was one of the miracles that happened. Um, and again, I heard that voice audibly that His grace is sufficient. So that in itself was the one of the most interesting things. And then on top of that, throughout the time, actually, this is one of the first times after I'd gotten out of the hospital, people in my neighborhood who I have never met. To this day, there's meaning I have never met these people. They came by the house and started dropping off groceries, gift cards. Um, Somehow word got out to the neighborhood that we were that I was in the hospital and needed to get out. Well, I just gotten out of the hospital and wasn't working, and so all these people just showed up and just gave us blessed us. So fast forward to where I went back to the hospital um, in 2019 to switch over to hemo. The same thing happens again. I didn't tell anybody I was in the hospital. Candy had we kind of kept it hush. Again, boxes of groceries were being dropped off in front of our house. Um, People at my daughter's ballet school were donating and giving to us. And again, I still get cheered up when I think about it that that voice keeps saying His grace is sufficient. Um, and so again, it's now summer of no, it's about January of 2019, no 2020. Um, I'm in the hospital again, and they can't figure out what's going on. And this was right when the COVID was hitting. Um, my arm's still messing up, and so they decide to put the graft in it. And at the same time, they're also dealing with me having shortness of breath. They can't figure out what's causing it. They think it's the fistula, so they put the graft. And after they're putting the graft, I go back in the hospital 2 weeks later, um, and they still can't figure out why I'm having trouble breathing. But which now we can kind of figure it's probably COVID. It was now at this point we can pretty much rule that was probably COVID. Um, Again, all this happens. The neighborhood. I remember my wife and the kids telling me that some people just showed up to the house. They didn't know who they were. Just gave them gift cards. Um, I remember some of the police officers would actually come up to my kids when they were playing outside and ask how I was doing. And I remember I encountered some of these at the grocery store. And they were like, "Hey, Mr. Rico, how you doing?" I have no idea who these people are. Like, I don't know these people. They just, this is how close knit the neighborhood is here. Um, Again, eternally grateful. And so that's how, you know, I seriously believe I was destined to go through this, and we'll get to that in a minute. But to see the grace of God throughout all this was interesting. Now, going to the transplant list, so back when I was actually able to get on the list, um, in 2019, this is where it starts getting interesting. Um, so I go to, I don't want to drop names. Screw it, I'll drop names because they're jerks anyway. So I go to St. Luke's here in Milwaukee, and they put me through test after test after test. Long story short, I get approved and put on their list. Um, I actually ended up going to the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, because it's a few hours away from here. Again, test, get put on there. Um, and both of them cannot figure out why the kidney failure has happened. The other hospital I've been to, they can't figure out why it happened. To this day, they cannot figure out why it happened. I know why it happened. So I can be here today telling you this story. And I seriously believe that. And people can argue, science and stuff. Look, science and faith work together. Science just explains how things happen. Faith is why it happens. That's how I believe it. You're not gonna change my mind on that. So if you're one of those that don't want to have anything to do with faith and don't listen anymore, just walk away. Because it's the cornerstone of now who my family is, because we've seen it firsthand. I can tell you of many miracles that have happened in my life, me and my wife together, angels appearing, people. But that's a whole other story. That will take days to explain all that. So I'm on a list, having to get tested and blah blah blah. And if anybody's been on a kidney transplant list, you already know how much of a pain in the tail those are to deal with, all the maintenance issues. You end up in the hospital for something, they kick you off the list, or rather, they deactivate you until you're fine. Well, St. Luke's is notorious for that crap. Even if you just go in for a sprained wrist to the hospital, they deactivate you until they check you out and then you're okay. Stupid, yes. So, fast forward. It is now 2022, last year. Um, it's around March. I get letters from Mayo. I get letters from St. Luke's saying you need the COVID vaccine or else you're going to be kicked off the list. Not deactivated, not um, just completely kicked off the list. So, I don't care what your political affiliation is, that shot is crap. Because I personally know of people who were on dialysis who were perfectly fine, had that shot, and are no longer here with us today. So that is my main reason why I refused that shot. Because I personally know of people who have passed away as a result of it. I'll tell you something. Nothing in the world is the worst thing to experience when you walk into a dialysis clinic and you people that you know, because you spend 3.5 hours there, 4 hours roughly. You get to know these people. You get to know the people who you sit next to. They become your family. They become your friends. Nothing hurts more than when you ask, "Hey, we're such. I don't see them in their chair," and the nurse just touches your hand, doesn't say a word, but there's tears in her eyes, and you know your friend's not around anymore. And for these hospitals to mandate because you don't want to get a stupid shot, they basically give you a death sentence. That is the worst thing ever. And so a lot of people told me just get the shot, just get the shot. No, because everything inside me said not to. And I'm so grateful that I didn't take it. Because all these, I won't get into that. But if you know, you know. If you know the tragedies that have occurred because of that, then you know. If you don't know, reach out to me. I'll explain it. So I had made the decision. My wife backed me up that I wasn't gonna get the shot, and I was gonna just accept whatever was gonna happen. Live by faith. But I had more peace about that. Like I knew I was gonna be okay. Like just I wasn't like, oh, I'm hoping. No, I knew. Yeah, I had my rough days. Because you're on some days in Dallas, you just feel like death is imminent. But I had peace about this. So fast forward to January of this year. Actually, take that back. December of last year, my dad calls me. Hey, at Baylor, they're not requiring the shot anymore. Um, why don't you come down here to get checked out? Because he had called around and there's something about that's something to be said about parents. Parents will fight for you, even though sometimes you want to be a pain in the butt to your parents. Your parents are gonna love you more than anything, and they will fight for you, and they will go to bat for you. Being a parent, I know what that's like. I have 3 kids that drive me insane, but there's nothing in the world that makes me happier than being around my 3 crazy kids. So, Dad, I know you're watching. Thank you for being a pain and keep on fighting for me. But anyway, my dad calls me up, says, "Hey, I know some people here in Baylor. They can see you." And I was like, "Okay." So I called them up, explained my situation, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we can come see you." So let's just let me get my. They got my insurance and Medicare information and said it can take a few weeks, but we'll call you back. Um, so I was like, okay. And so, sorry, I had to moving this thing around. Um, so instead of it taking weeks, they call me back like in 2 days. Hey, your insurance went through. You're approved to get the workup. We can see you on in the middle of January, which was like a few weeks. So I was like, okay, sure, why not? Um, and so I haven't seen my family in 6 years at this point. I haven't been back home, so I think this was God showing me, hey, things are getting better. I'm gonna have you come home, and it wasn't that long. It was just a few days, but it was the best few days I've had in a very long time. Something having Texas sweet tea, your mom's cooking her menudo, which is the best menudo in the world. Um, being around your nieces and nephews, brothers, um, that's healing. That in itself is a very healing thing to be around family, to be around friends. I got to see some dear friends. I love y'all know who you are. I love you so much. They've been with me through this whole ordeal, encouraging. I got to hang out with a good friend. We went out to the piano bar and got to hang out and you know, it was a great time to be back home. Sometimes you gotta go home. Um, so everything went great. Baylor is amazing. Their staff is amazing. If you need to get any um, Baylor, you're awesome. So I came back home. Ironically, um, about a week after I'm back, my nephrologist comes up to me and is like, hey, Freighter doesn't have the vaccine mandate anymore. You should probably go talk to them. I was like, really? And I talked to my wife Candy, and I'm like, should I call them? She's like, doesn't it hurt to call them? And so I called them, and they're like, yeah, we don't have the mandate. Yeah, we can see. They got my information, and it's going to take about a week for them to call me back. But they pushed me, put me right ahead in there, and then Candy was finally able to come with me to that workup, and it was very interesting. If you ever have to deal with the Kinney Group Freighter of Milwaukee, great team. Seriously, a great team to deal with. Um, so everything went smoothly. Everything went good. Testing went perfect. And they approved me right away. They were like, "Yeah, you're good to go." I had to get some dental work done, but that was the only major thing I had to do is just get some dental work done. Got the got that fixed, and I was on the list. And so, and all this was around March. So about middle of May, they call me. And they're like, "Hey, just letting you know, um, your name is, they found some stuff genetically, which is positive, some good stuff. They're like, hey, so just say, don't be surprised if you get a call soon, um, because your name, is going to the top of the list because you've been on dialysis for so long." And so I was like, okay, cool, whatever. And I'm kind of at this point, I've kind of accepted, I've heard that before, same stuff. So another weird thing that happened in May 16th, our beloved Carlos, our dog, our lab, passed away. Um, it was hard. I still cry over him. I miss him dearly. He was one of our good friends. It is a story behind that, which I'll get into some other point. But you know, his passing was kind of hard to deal with, and so fast forward to June 16th, exactly 1 month later. My daughter pointed that out, which was interesting. Um, that morning, I had a dialysis treatment, like normal. It was like any other day. And so I fell asleep like I normally do. And I had a dream, a very interesting dream. In that dream, sorry, had an alarm going off. In that dream, I was in a dialysis chair, ironically, and in my right hand, I see what looks like a blood stain in the shape of a kidney. And then, um, hold on 1 second. I got a phone call. 1 second. I will continue this real quick. Sorry about that. I had a phone call I had to deal with. Going back to what I was talking about. So yeah, the day of the transplant, or morning of, I had a dream while I was in dialysis. Um, like I said, I was dreaming I was in dialysis while I was in dialysis. Um, so in the dream, my right hand, in the palm, a blood stain showed up, and it was a kidney-shaped blood stain. And I heard in a very audible voice, "He died for you." And then I look at my hand, and it turns into like an image of Jesus, and then it turns into the world. So I'm figuring, oh, it's one of those because I've had dreams like that where it's like God's telling you He loves you, and then I wake up, treatment's over, and if anybody who has done dialysis knows, if you have a fistula, they put two shanks in your arm or two needles, and you got to hold them till they stop bleeding. Well, mine wouldn't stop bleeding to the point where they were about to send me to the ER because 2 hours had passed and they wouldn't stop bleeding. So they had to put an ice pack on it and a Sure Seal to get it to stop, and it finally stopped. So that was the one of the weirder things to happen. Um, and so the whole day hit was kind of weird because even on my job, I had just been moved from the account that I was on. But basically they told me that I'm going on the shelf. They're gonna move me to a different account. So I was basically I was still getting paid, but I wasn't working. So I was kind of like, crap, what's going on? I'm not making the overtime I was making. Um, so now I'm basically in between jobs, but I still got a job, but just in between. So I was like, okay, whatever. And fast forward to that night, I was actually gonna stay up playing video games. I was like, I'm not working in the morning. I got nothing to do. Might as well stay up and play some video games. And my wife was like, hey, you need to come to bed. You need to get some rest. You look tired. And I never listened to her. I never. I'm always like, no, no, no. I got this. I can, you know, I can do, play video games. But then she just gives me the look, the wife look. I'm like, fine, I'll go to bed. And so she falls asleep before I do. And I was just praying. And it was interesting about my prayer because I was kind of like, God, I give up. I don't know what you have in store for me. I don't know what's going on. Um, I'm not going to question it. Just whatever your will is, whatever. So be it. I'm done trying to. I'm done trying to figure things out and trying to get in the way. Literally, I said that. Say amen. Put my head back on the pillow, and I hear my phone ring. And I'm like, I'm sitting there. I'm like, is my phone ringing? Who's calling me this late? And I look at the number, and it doesn't say freighter. It doesn't say like Baylor. It doesn't say anything medical. It just says a person's name, and it's a Chicago number. And I go, hello? She goes, hi, is this Mr. Rico? I'm like, yes, him. She's like, hey, this is Dolores with the freighter transplant team. How you doing? I'm like, okay. She goes, so we just called and we just want to let you know that the doctors identified the perfect kidney for you. They kept saying that. I guess that's remember that. So they kept saying, because like, yeah, it's a perfect match for you. Your doctors have approved it for you. You're good to go. We need you to come to the hospital. And my wife's waking up at this point because she's reaching over and she's touching me. And she's like, who is it? And I'm like, and then she goes, yeah. And so she's giving me instructions. I gotta come down to the hospital. My wife hears the word hospital. Her eyes pop open, and she's looking at me. And I put the phone like this. I'm like, it's the call. She's like, the call. It's the call. We kept saying that. It's like, it's the call. It's the call. It's the call. So she jumps out of the bed while I'm getting the instructions, and she's um, getting herself ready, and then getting the kids, waking them up, letting them know because we have had a plan in place somewhat. um, so I get the instructions. Head down a freighter. They're flying the kidney in at the moment, So just come down there and they'll check me in and get everything done. So this is about 10:30 at night. So literally 10:30 is when I went to bed and got the call. Um, so she's calling. She gets the kids up. Um, she's calling her family, her friends. Because we had kind of like I said, we had some plans in place. Um, my son comes up to me. He goes, "I'm gonna miss you, Dad. Say hi to everybody in Texas for me." I'm like, "It's not Texas. It's Freighter. It's here in Milwaukee." And he's like, "Oh, okay," because poor kids were half asleep. Um, and so I had my suitcase packed um, already previously. Um, excuse me, I gotta drink some of this. New kidney, you gotta drink a lot of water. Um, so yeah, so we get in the car and we book it down there. And it's normally takes about an hour to get there. We got there a lot sooner than that. um, so we get there. We go to where they tell us, and they're like, oh, we're not. They're not ready for me. The kidney still hasn't arrived. And so we're like, okay, so we're hanging out, waiting, and Candy turns to me and she goes, "Hey, do you hear that?" I'm like, "What?" And she goes, "The helicopter." I'm like, "Yeah, oh yeah, I can hear the helicopter." She goes, "Wouldn't it be funny? That's your kidney." And I'm like, "Nah, it wouldn't be like that." 10 minutes later, they tell us, "Hey, they're ready for you. You can go up to the fourth floor." And it's like, "Oh my god, that was a kidney." And so, um, they take me up, and just everything was just like so fast because they kept telling me, "Hey, yeah, it's the perfect match for you." That's what they kept saying. Everybody kept saying, "Oh yeah, it's a perfect match." And so they get me in there. They start prepping me up. You know, Nurse comes in, starts marking the belly where they're gonna do the incision and stuff. Um, and so it's just like, okay, they, put the IVs in, and at this point it's about 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning. Um, so they get the IVs in, start taking the blood. They take, I think it was 22 vials, I think, if I remember, of blood they took. And um, yeah, and then um, I asked them because they're like, normally if you're on to get a transplant, they call you and they call two alternate backups, which is usually the case. When I asked them about that, I was like, they're like, no, there's no backups. This one's for you. This is your kidney. That's what they all kept saying. Oh yeah, this is your kidney. Congratulations on your kidney. So about it's about 2:30. They come in. They're like, yeah, everything's perfect. You're good to go. You're next up on surgery. We have another transplant ahead of you. Um, so once that's done, we'll go ahead and take you up. I was like, okay. So fast forward, it's about 4:45. Um, they come and get me, and they take me down to the operating room. Which I'll tell you, the time from 12:30 to 4:45 was the longest and fastest waiting period I've ever been in. I can't explain it. I can't. I can't explain it. I just that's. It was the longest, but it was the shortest time. It was literally both at the same time. If that makes sense, which it doesn't make sense, but I know it makes sense to those who know. Um, so they wheel me into the operating room, and one of the nurses there, they and the doctors there, and they both have two sheets of paper checklist, and they're like, "Hey, it's O negative, O negative," and then they were seeing some other numbers, And the doctor turns to me. She goes, "Wow, this is the perfect match for you." And as soon as he says that, the anesthesiologist behind me, they put the mask on me, and all I hear is night, night, and it's just black. I don't remember a thing. I don't remember anything after that. Um, I just remember waking up in the recovery room in pain in my abdomen because there were the nurses there were messing with it. Were actually kind of they were getting me situated, and and so I just felt pain where the surgery was, and I see Candy walking in the room, and I'm like, what is? I had no idea what was. I didn't know where I was at because I was coming out of the anesthesia, and so when the doctors comes in, they're like, yeah, I used to surgery was a success, everything went well. So normally it takes about 3 to 4 hours for a transplant. Mine took 2 hours, two, and they said everything went perfect. There was no complications. Everything looks great. And they told me, don't be surprised if you gotta do a dialysis treatment or two, because sometimes it takes a while for your kidney to kick on. But as soon as they said that, she looks over and she says, "Oh wow, there's some urine in your catheter. Never mind, it's already working. You're doing good. Okay." So so yeah. So the transplant went perfect without a hitch. Um, and so they after that a little bit later on they transferred me to my bed, to my actual hospital room, and everything's looking great. The labs are coming back, producing. Not to be gross, but they're having to change out the little collection thing constantly because it's the beans working, man. The beans working. As one of my nurses said, like, wow, that bean is up, activated and working. Um, and so I was healing. I've been healing a lot faster than expected. So all this was Friday. By Sunday, actually, that Friday afternoon, I had already done my first walk. They had me up and walking. Saturday, I was up and walking a few times. Um, and then by Sunday, the kids were actually able to visit me. And no, actually, it was Saturday. They were actually able to come visit me that Saturday. Um, and so that we were able to go do a walk. And so everything's looking good. By Sunday, they took the catheter out, and then I learned something that the kidney's working really well because I've been going to the bathroom like 50 times a day just get it up and just swim. Which, if you haven't used the bathroom normally in 6 years, it's the best feeling in the world and something I do not take for granted. Even to today, 3 weeks out, I still go off quite often because, again, chugging about two of these a day. Um, and so everything's looking great. The kidney is working. It's functional. I get the staples removed tomorrow. So if I post this today or tonight, Friday, I'm getting the staples taken out. Um, but everything is looking great. Um, and so I definitely feel this was a miracle because God's timing. I'm in between allocations at the moment. Um, People from our church and friends have come out. They brought us meals. Um, the kindness of people have just been overwhelming. The prayers and of others have just been. I can't thank people enough. I can't thank my wife enough. I tell her all the time I'm gonna make this up to her one day. Um, I promise I'm going to take her to Puerto Rico one day because that's her dream. Um, my kids have been phenomenal through this. You know, they're kids, so of course they push back, but they've been supportive. My daughter has gone above and beyond, um, being a caretaker. You know, I can't. There's so many people to thank on this journey. You know, you nurses, you dialysis nurses, anybody who's worked in the medical field. I can't thank you enough. The doctors at Freighter, I'll be specific, were incredible. My nephrologist who put up with me for these 6 years. God, I know I gave him some white hairs. um, but there's just, I know what grace is. And so many people who want to knock, not religion, but the belief in God, because they're like, well, if he really loves you, he would fully heal you, or he'll never let you go through this. Sometimes it's not the actual healing that you need. Sometimes it's the journey that actually shows you living through grace. Because I could have easily died throughout this whole 6 year process, but yeah, I kept fighting. There were days I felt fine, but others said I looked not so fine. So that's grace when you can live through a disease, come out on the other end. Now, yeah, the transplant's not a cure, but damn it, it feels like a cure to me because I'm able to do things that I hadn't been able to do before, or rather in 6 years. And so I understand now. I see what that grace is. It's not how to say, it's not you can get away with anything. It's that he walks with you through your troubles and through your perils. That's what grace is, and I've learned the hard way. I know the hard way, but I learned that lesson, and I'm still learning the lessons. So thank you. I know this was a long video. Thank you for listening. Thank you for. I hope this encouraged you. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. I will always be willing to answer any questions or give some encouragement when it comes to this type of situation. Um, so, again, thank you for listening and watching, and I hope you have a good night.